Ever get that feeling? You're trying to wrap your head around something complex, maybe a big idea or a new topic.
Yeah, information overload, right.
Exactly. You've got all these bits and pieces swirling, and it feels like you're missing the main point somehow. You want to get it, but it's just overwhelming. Well, that's kind of what we do here. Welcome to the deep dive. We try to take those big piles of information, all the source material you send us, and really pull out the key stuff.
The insights that actually stick, the connections you might have missed otherwise.
Yeah, think of it as your shortcut to really understanding what matters in the material you've chosen.
And today, we're focusing that approach for you on the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna. Specifically, we're looking at his interactions with a really renowned scholar, Pundit Sasadhar Tarkachudamani.
Okay.
We're drawing mainly from the life of Sri Ramakrishna biography to, unpack the ideas that came out of their meetings.
That's a fascinating matchup, isn't it? Sri Ramakrishna, known for his direct mystical experiences.
Right, very experiential.
And then this Pundit Sasadhar, who's deeply respected for his knowledge of scriptures, tradition.
The top scholar of his day, yeah. So you've got these two really different angles on spirituality coming face to face.
It sounds like a real contrast, the intellectual approach versus the path of derivative experience and devotion.
Absolutely. And that contrast, it really highlights different ways to understand things, doesn't it? The dynamic between them is, it's incredibly revealing.
So what's our goal then for this deep dive? What are we trying to pull out for the listener?
Well, our mission really is to dig into these encounters. We want to extract the core principles that they talked about, things like devotion, that deep love for the divine.
Okay.
The role of knowledge, what makes someone a spiritual authority, and the different paths to realization.
And we want to present it in a way that's insightful, but also, maybe gives you something to think about for your own journey, your own quest for understanding.
Exactly. Not just information, but maybe some food for thought too.
Okay, sounds good. Let's dive in. Where do we start? That first meeting.
Yeah, the first recorded meeting. It's dated June 25th. And Sri Ramakrishna, he kicks things off with a very direct question to the Pundit.
Oh, what did he ask?
He just says, well, what do you lecture about? Simple, practical. It sort of sets the tone, doesn't it? Focused on what he actually does.
Right, cuts right to it. And the Pundit's response?
He says he lectures on the scriptures, explaining them, which you'd expect from a scholar, I suppose.
Makes sense.
But Sri Ramakrishna's reply, it's quite something. He suggests that, in this particular age, the Kali Yuga,
which is seen as a more challenging time in Hindu thought.
Exactly. In this age, he says, just expounding scriptures might not be the most effective way. He emphasizes devotion, bhakti, particularly the kind taught by Narada, as the faster path.
Faster? Interesting. Did he explain why?
Yeah, he uses this great analogy. It's like medicine. He compares relying only on scripture study now to using, say, an old, slow-acting herbal remedy for a really high fever.
Okay. So you need something more direct, quicker acting.
Precisely. His point is, time's short in this age, life is fleeting. Intense devotion is like the modern, potent mixture that works fast. So the takeaway is really that bhakti offers a more direct route now.
I see. He felt people just didn't have the lifespan or maybe the focus for those extensive ancient rituals anymore.
That seems to be the idea. He points out there's barely enough time. And he adds, lectures often don't make much impact on people who are, mostly wrapped up in worldly things.
He had an analogy for that too, didn't he? Something about a calf.
Yeah, the newborn calf analogy. He suggests the pundit might not yet be able to tell who's strong enough, spiritually speaking, to really absorb the teachings. Like a calf that can't stand up right away. It's quite pointed.
It shows he's really observing people where they're at spiritually.
Right.
He's not dismissing the scriptures, but saying the approach needs to fit the time and the person.
Exactly. It's about appropriateness, effectiveness.
And then there was that other image, the flower and the fruit.
Oh, right. Beautiful one. He says rituals, the outward practices, they're like the flower. But devotion, bhakti, that's the fruit, the real substance.
So there's a natural progression.
Yeah, he talks about moving from, say, the daily Thanda prayers towards meditating on Om, the symbol of ultimate reality, and then finally reaching samadhi, that state of deep spiritual absorption.
And he compared that to something fading.
The sound of a bell chime, how it gets fainter and fainter until it just dissolves into silence. A lovely way to describe that inward journey, pulling away from the external.
Wow. And wasn't it during this very conversation that something remarkable happened?
Yes. He actually went into samadhi himself, right there while talking to the pundit. It's like a real-time demonstration of the state he's describing.
Incredible. Talk about showing, not just telling.
Absolutely. And when he came back to normal consciousness, he mentioned something about wanting to meet another scholar, having already met Vidyasagar. Shows his own interest and different learned perspective.
But he also had some pretty direct advice for the pundit himself, didn't he?
Oh yes, very direct. He tells Sasadhar to become stronger spiritually before trying to teach widely. He warns against rushing into it without what he calls divine authority or command.
Divine authority. What did he mean by that? Like a direct commission from God?
It seems so. He uses these analogies, moths being drawn helplessly to a flame, or iron instantly attracted to a powerful magnet.
Ah, so a true teacher with that authority just attracts people naturally. No need for, like, advertising or argument.
That's the implication. The power is inherent, magnetic. It raises a big question about what really qualifies someone to teach spiritual truths. Is intellectual knowledge enough?
And Ramakrishna's answer seems to be no.
Pretty clearly, he felt there needed to be this deeper experiential grounding, this divine sanction. And then Hazra, who was there, actually asks the pundit point blank, do you have that command?
And what did the pundit say?
He was honest. He admitted, no, I don't.
Wow. And Ramakrishna's reaction?
He didn't mince words. He basically said, well then, of what value are the lectures of someone who hasn't received the Lord's authority? It's a strong challenge to the conventional idea of scholarship as the main qualification.
Definitely challenges the status quo.
Then he softens it a bit, maybe, was another analogy. The pool of nectar.
Oh yeah, immortality.
Right. He says you can reach this pool, this immortality, in many ways. You could jump right in, maybe take the steps down carefully, or someone could even push you in.
Doesn't matter how you get there, the result is the same.
Exactly. And he connects this to the different spiritual paths. Jnana yoga, knowledge; bhakti yoga, devotion; karma yoga, selfless action. Sincere effort on any path leads to the goal.
So he's validating different approaches, even while emphasizing bhakti for the current age.
Yes. And he adds a crucial point. Realizing the Divine Mother, which was central for him, actually brings both knowledge and devotion. They aren't separate goals in his view.
They go together.
For him, yes. One informs the other. Knowledge without love can be dry. Love without understanding can be maybe unfocused. They need each other.
Makes sense. Now, the pundit asked him about pilgrimages too, right? What was Ramakrishna's take on that?
It's quite insightful. He sort of contrasts his own limited physical travel with Hazra's extensive journeys, but then he uses that shop analogy.
The birds, kites and vultures.
Yes, soaring way up high, looking majestic, but what are they looking for?
Carrion, right? Impure stuff on the ground.
Exactly. He equates that carrion to worldly desires, specifically lust and greed for wealth. His point is, you can go on all the pilgrimages you want, soar high externally, but if your inner focus is still on those base desires, what's the real benefit?
So inner transformation trumps outer activity again.
That's a recurring theme, definitely. Where you are physically matters less than your inner state.
He also talked about timing, didn't he? The right moment for understanding.
Ah, yes. The analogy of the child and its mother. The mother wants the child to wake up and eat, but the child just wants to sleep, no matter how much the mother tries.
The child only wakes up when it's actually hungry.
Precisely. It suggests there's a kind of inner readiness, a natural unfolding needed for spiritual truths to really land and take root. You can't force it before it's time.
That's subtle. So even with the best teacher, the student needs to be ready.
Exactly. It acknowledges that receptivity is key, which led him to talk about different kinds of teachers.
Oh yeah, the three types. Like doctors?
Yes, the three classes of the doctors or teachers. Some just give the diagnosis and prescription, tell you what to do, and leave.
Okay, sort of hands off.
Others try to persuade the patient or student to take the medicine, explaining why it's good for them.
More involved.
And then the third type, the best kind, according to him, if the patient refuses, they might even, put a knee on their chest and force the medicine down. Metaphorically speaking, of course.
Wow. So a really engaged teacher who takes responsibility for the student's progress.
That's the idea. Deep compassion and commitment, willing to do whatever it takes, gently but firmly, to help the student.
But the pundit had a question about that, right?
Yeah.
If you have such a great first-class teacher, why do you still need the right moment? Shouldn't the teacher make it happen?
Good question. And Sri Ramakrishna replies with another analogy. Imagine the best doctor gives the most potent medicine,
Yes.
but the patient can't keep it down. Maybe it just trickles out the side of their mouth. Can the doctor help then?
Not really, I guess. The medicine isn't being absorbed.
Exactly. So the student's receptivity, their ability to actually take in and digest the teaching, is absolutely crucial to partnership.
It really puts responsibility on the seeker, too.
It does. And he also stressed adapting the guidance. He gave that example of a young boy who had family duties.
Right, you can't just tell them to renounce everything.
No. The advice has to fit the person's life, their responsibilities. It shows a very practical, compassionate approach. Not one size fits all.
There was also that story about the Sikh soldiers. Something about mercy.
Oh yes, at Dakshanswar. He heard them talking about God's daya, his mercy or compassion, and he had this insight. It wasn't some abstract, distant pity.
What was it then?
He felt it was more like the intimate, loving care of a father for his own children. Very personal, very close. It shifts the feeling from awe and distance to intimacy and belonging.
That's a beautiful shift in perspective.
It really is, taking a standard concept and making it deeply personal.
Now, there was that small detail about the glass of water.
Ah, yes. He initially refused it because someone considered impure by the social standards of the time had touched it. It's a brief reminder of the social context he lived in.
Even someone focused on unity still navigated those complex social rules.
It seems so. His core message often transcended them, but the day-to-day reality was still there.
And finally, as he was leaving that first meeting, he said something quite profound to Sasadhar, comparing him to the moon.
Yes, a very clever metaphorical compliment. Or maybe a subtle warning. He compared the Pundit to the full moon.
Which is beautiful at its peak.
But after the peak comes the waning, the decline. He contrasted this with Rama, an incarnation of God whom he compared to the new crescent moon.
Which only grows brighter.
Exactly. Constantly increasing. It's a fascinating thought. Is knowledge a peak you reach? Or is spiritual growth always ongoing?
Definitely something to ponder. Okay, so that covers the first encounter. What about the second meeting?
That happened just a few days later, June 30th, this time at the Dakshanswar temple garden where Sri Ramakrishna lived.
And the dynamic was a bit different this time. I read he felt nervous.
Yeah, the source mentions he often felt a kind of nervousness or maybe humility when very learned or celebrated people came to visit, perhaps conscious of his own lack of formal schooling compared to someone like the Pundit.
Interesting. He even asked devotees to be there for support.
Yes, he did. It really highlights that contrast. Again, the Pundit's authority from books, Sri Ramakrishna's from, well, somewhere else entirely.
So how did the meeting actually begin?
Interestingly, he first asks the Pundit to speak, but then almost immediately he drifts into a kind of semi-conscious state, a trance-like state.
Again, wow.
But when he comes back a bit, he starts describing Brahman, the ultimate reality, but not in dry philosophical terms. He describes it poetically as initially manifesting like a twin principle Purusha, which is like pure consciousness, and Prakriti, which is nature or energy.
Okay.
And then how these two appear to separate, creating the duality we experience. It's a very mystical description of creation, really.
And then his mood shifted.
Dramatically, he becomes very animated, starts singing devotional songs with intense feeling, urging the Pundit, dive deep, pray with intense longing. It's a real shift from explaining concepts to embodying devotion.
From the head to the heart, you could say.
Exactly. And then he lays out this sort of hierarchy of understanding.
Hierarchy.
He says, hearing spiritual truths from a teacher who has realized them is good, better than just reading about them in a book.
Why better?
Because the teacher embodies the truth. There's a direct transmission. But he says, even better than hearing is seeing, having your own direct personal realization. That removes all doubt.
Experience trumps everything else in the end.
That's the core message. And he uses that famous analogy, the Bengali almanac.
Right, the one that predicts rain.
Exactly. It might predict gallons of rain, but if you squeeze the pages of the almanac itself, you won't get a single drop of water.
Huh. That's brilliant. So, knowing about God isn't the same as experiencing God.
Spot on. Intellectual knowledge without the water of realization and devotion is ultimately dry. It doesn't quench the spiritual thirst.
And this interaction had a powerful effect on the Pundit.
Immense. Sri Ramakrishna later described the experience to a devotee. He felt this incredible surge of energy, this current rush, lost all fear or self-consciousness, and words just poured out of him like grain pouring out when being measured back in his village.
An incessant torrent, the text is.
Yes. He said he was barely aware of what he was saying, and when he looked, the pundit was just sitting there, weeping, completely overcome.
So it wasn't just an argument or a lecture he was hearing. It was something much more profound. A transmission of sorts.
It really seems like it. A transmission of spiritual energy, of presence, that went far beyond the words themselves. It bypassed the intellect and hit the heart.
Okay, so that's the second meeting. Powerful stuff. What about the third one?
This one happened just 3 days later at the house of a devotee named Balaram Bose. And here, Sri Ramakrishna offers the pundit what he calls 2 tests of knowledge.
Tests of knowledge, not like an exam, I assume.
No, not at all. The tests were, first, having a naturally quiet and serene disposition.
Inner peace.
Right. And second, a complete absence of egoism, of I-ness. And interestingly, he acknowledges that the pundit has these qualities.
So he's complimenting the pundit's inner state, not just his learning. He sees the marks of true understanding beyond just intellect.
Exactly. Again, it's about the inner qualities that accompany real knowledge, peace, and humility, not just knowing facts.
Then the pundit asks about devotion again.
Yes, he asks specifically what kind of devotion is needed to reach God. And Sri Ramakrishna gives this classic explanation of the 3 types, based on the gunas, or temperaments.
Sattva, Rajas, Tamas.
Precisely. He explains Sattvika devotion first. This is the devotion of someone with a calm, pure, inward-looking nature.
How does that manifest?
They love secrecy. They might meditate very privately, maybe even under a mosquito net so no one sees. It's quiet, internal. He compares it to the stillness and light just before dawn. Subtle, but powerful.
Okay, makes sense. What about Rajasika?
Rajasika devotion belongs to the active, energetic, perhaps slightly ostentatious temperament. They like a bit of display.
Like how?
Think elaborate worship, beautiful decorations, maybe wearing fine silks, expensive prayer beads like pearl or gold rudrakshas, a more royal style of devotion.
Right. And the third, Tamasika. That sounds potentially negative, but maybe not here.
Not necessarily negative in terms of sincerity. Tamasika devotion is characterized by intense, forceful, unwavering faith, maybe even a bit fierce.
Fierce.
He uses the analogy of dacoits bandits raiding a house. They rush in with a loud battle cry, completely convinced of their purpose.
Wow. So it's about the intensity and absolute conviction.
Yes. He connects it to the faith of some Sakti worshippers, followers of the Divine Mother, who believe absolutely that just uttering the Mother's name with that fierce conviction can burn away lifetimes of sin instantly.
That's powerful faith. So devotion isn't one size fits all either. It depends on your basic nature.
Exactly. It can look very different from the outside, but the underlying love and faith can be equally strong.
And Sri Ramakrishna himself got quite emotional during this part.
Oh, absolutely. Filled with divine fervor, he starts singing this incredibly moving song about the power of the Divine Mother's name, how it saves you even at the moment of death if you can just call on her.
And the pundit's reaction.
He was weeping again, deeply touched not just by the words, but by Sri Ramakrishna's intense devotion and his life of complete renunciation. It clearly had a profound effect on him.
It sounds like these meetings were really transformative for the pundit.
They certainly seem to have been deeply impactful. Now, this third meeting happened during the Rathotsav, the car festival.
The big celebration.
Yes, very joyous. And Sri Ramakrishna actually joins in the singing and dancing with the devotees. He's fully immersed in that devotional joy.
And he contrasted that kind of joy with worldly pleasure.
He did. He explained later that the bliss you get from spiritual practices, from connecting with the divine, is totally different from the pleasure you get from sense objects.
How so?
Worldly pleasure is fleeting, he said, often followed by disappointment or pain. But spiritual bliss, the bliss of Brahman, is pure, lasting, and ultimately the highest form of enjoyment there is.
The ultimate goal.
Yes, and he talked about the kind of yearning you need to achieve it. He used that very intense story.
The teacher and the disciple underwater.
That's the one. The teacher holds the disciple's head underwater until the disciple is absolutely desperate, struggling, gasping for air.
That sounds extreme.
It is, but the point is the intensity. The teacher then asks, "How did you feel?" The disciple says, "I felt like I was dying. I needed air so badly."
And the teacher's response.
When you long for God that intensely, like a drowning man longs for air, then you will realize him. It illustrates the just sheer desperation, the one-pointed focus required.
Wow. That really drives the point home about the level of desire needed.
It certainly does, and his final summarizing statement in these accounts really brings it all together.
What's that?
He simply says, love for God is the chief thing. We need devotion. Back to the core message from the very first meeting, bhakti.
So if we were to sort of wrap up the key takeaways from this whole deep dive into their encounters, what stands out?
Well, first and foremost, Sri Ramakrishna's consistent emphasis on devotion, bhakti, as being particularly vital in our current age.
Right. More effective than just scriptural study alone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which leads to the second point. The limits of purely intellectual understanding, if it's not paired with personal experience, with realization. The almanac doesn't give water.
Got it. What else?
The need for what he called divine authority or command to be a truly effective spiritual teacher, that inner magnetism.
Not just academic credentials.
Right. Then there's the concept of the right moment, that inner readiness needed for spiritual awakening alongside the teacher's efforts.
The importance of receptivity.
Yes. And also his nuanced understanding of devotion itself, how it manifests differently based on temperament, the Sattvika, Rajasika, Tamasika types.
So acknowledging different valid styles.
Definitely. And ultimately, all of this points towards the main goal, attaining that deep, loving connection with the divine and experiencing the bliss that comes from it.
And looking at these interactions with such a learned pundit, it really grounds these ideas, doesn't it? It takes them out of maybe abstract philosophy.
And shows them in action, in a real conversation between two very different approaches. It highlights the practical side of spiritual seeking, moving beyond just theory.
It shows how these profound ideas were discussed and lived out.
Absolutely. Which leads us, I think, to a really important question for you, the listener, to maybe reflect on.
Okay.
Thinking about what we've discussed, those different paths to the pool of nectar Sri Ramakrishna mentioned, knowledge, devotion, selfless action. Which of those resonates most strongly with you right now in your own life?
That's a good question.
And maybe tied to that, consider your own pursuit of knowledge, whatever it might be. Is it leading you towards a deeper connection, a more profound understanding, a kind of devotion to the truth you seek? Or is it perhaps becoming more about just accumulating information?
That's definitely worth mulling over. Is the knowledge transforming you or just sitting in your head like the almanac?
Precisely. It's a challenging but maybe useful reflection.
Indeed. And if this deep dive into Sri Ramakrishna and Pundit Sasadhar has, sparked your interest,
we'd absolutely encourage you to explore Sri Ramakrishna's life and teachings further. There's just a tremendous depth and richness there.
a lot more nectar in that pool.
You could say that. Definitely worth exploring.
I hope you like this chapter. We need volunteers and sponsors to create content with even better quality and with more variety. If you wish to join this initiative as a volunteer or sponsor, please click the links given in description below. To help us reach more viewers, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Biography Central. Thank you for your time. It means a lot. Namaste.